brought back. I walk down the halls and like tell everybody, you guys know who Kerry Carter is? Do you know who Kerry Carter? You see that jersey in the hallway there? Do you know who that guy is? Oh yeah, kind of. I don't know. Like, yeah,
These kids, man, they don't remember any of that stuff.
no.
It's
Well,
not recent.
think about how long ago it was too.
I know. Oh, I know. Believe me, the gray hairs keep telling me. More and more. I'm like, yeah, it's been a little while.
Deep inside it's killing me. Close your eyes and hope to see, but you might be the death of me, the very last breath of me. And still I hold on to those ways.
Well, welcome guys to the Deep Inside podcast. I'm excited for today's guest. I was quite honored to share the football field in high school with them. A guy who went on to Stanford to play on the Stanford team. Basically, he broke some records there. On to Seattle Seahawks, Washington Redskins, to the Alouettes, to now the CEO of Atavis. Pleasure to have him on the podcast, Mr. Kerry Carter. So welcome, Kerry.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's good to see you again.
Nice to see you too. It's been quite a long time. Nice to have you on.
They were getting gray in the same place there. Yeah. That's where it starts.
I'm starting to lose it at top though, so you still got yours.
I just cut it off though most of the time anyway. So
awesome, man. So thanks for coming on. I think you have a really interesting story. I mean, a lot of people, especially Super Bowl just finished. You had a taste of it to a certain degree. You were involved in it. So we shared, we played high school football together. We shared some great memories, and to see somebody who actually shared high school football with to then move on to have the success that you had, but you also had quite a journey as well along the way. So let's start right from the back, like right from the beginning, your upbringing. So you were born in Tobago?
Port of Spain, Trinidad.
In Trinidad. Okay. And your family came over at what age?
Yeah, so I was 9 when my mom brought us up. But I mean, even before that, I spent my first part of my childhood in Trinidad, and my mom actually went ahead. Her dad lived in Toronto. He's a little older, and unfortunately, had cancer. So she actually went up to take care of him and was away for about a year and a half. And then she came and got myself and 2 younger brothers. And so we joined her at the end of, I want to say 1989. So literally right after my 9th birthday, we flew into Toronto. I never felt that kind of cold before coming from Trinidad. I never had a jacket. It was a lot of firsts for me at that point, man. But it was, you don't realize kind of the extent of those things when you're that age. But that was a big leap, right? To move from islands to Trinidad. She's looking for a better life for herself and her kids, and so she got a nursing job up there, and then brought us over, and that kind of started our journey right there on Weston and Shepherd.
There you go. So come over at a young age. So I know football is going to probably be our common denominator for this, but did you have an interest when you were back home? When you came here, was football on the radar? How did you ended up falling into football at that point?
Yeah, no, actually, it wasn't on the radar at all for me. I mean, growing up in Trinidad, you play cricket, you play football, soccer, and track and things like that. So I remember watching a couple games, but it wasn't anything that was honestly of a great interest to me early on. It wasn't until elementary school, and actually my younger brother Kern wanted to play. And he wanted to play with one of the teams, North York Bandits at the time. I think they changed their name now. But, because he wanted to go, my mom was like, well, you have to take him. So you might as well just go and play, if you're going to be there. And so I took him, and so he joined the younger league, and I joined kind of the, I think it was Pee Wee leagues. And yeah, honestly, it wasn't even my favorite sport, at the time. I loved, I just started learning about, start playing volleyball, and track was, always a big one for me. Soccer was, something I grew up playing. So I really loved that. And then my first couple of years of football, I didn't really know the sport that well. Didn't watch it a lot. So even the coach, I remember going to practice and the coaches, hearing my name, Kerry Carter, like, oh, are you related to Chris Carter? And I didn't even know who Chris Carter was at the time. I was like, no, I don't think I have any cousins named Chris. And they're like, okay. But yeah, I mean, it was a funny thing, man. If it wasn't for him wanting to play, I wouldn't have even started it, because it wasn't, running around and hitting people wasn't even on my mind at that age. But, obviously worked out.
Well, what I remember you from the field is that you were avoiding a lot of those hits, and you ended up most of the time at the end zone. So. It was quite
opposite. Yeah, that's more of what, even though I was like a bigger back, it was more about like, footwork and like I said, avoiding the hits. And yeah, I mean, I didn't mind contact and learned to enjoy it, as the years went by, and probably more aggressive with the ball in my hands than without it. But that was a journey, right? Like, I played a few years there, and that was before high school. And then when I first got to high school, I actually wasn't going to play, because our Bandits team, a lot of the times they didn't, because we played in the summer and then we had still practices and games in the fall, like leading up to the championship. So they didn't like you playing both. And so first year I wasn't even going to play, but I remember, was it Mr. Rossetti? Mr. Rossetti came and talked to me, and I think Mr. Pietrangelo too. They were both, heard that I played, and I think my cousin Carl was at the school before, and he played, and so they're like, yeah, you should at least come and try out. And so I went out, and but I also had other responsibilities at the time, right? Like a single mom, 3 boys, so I would have to pick up my youngest brother from daycare, and so I couldn't be out that late all the time, right? So I went out to practice, ran around, I think, ended up running through a couple of people, and then I told the coach, I was like, man, I gotta go, I gotta go pick up my brother. And he's like, all right, you're gonna come back tomorrow though. It's like, yeah,
you're coming back.
I'll be back. So yeah, that started the journey.
So throughout the high school career, I mean, I tell people this all the time, when you're on the field with somebody who you just can see the person, like, this guy's destined for greatness. And I mean that with all sincerity. Watching you, playing with you on the field, like, this guy's friggin' good, man. Like, you can just see that did you know at any point in time, grade 10, 11, 12, OEC, obviously OEC, you started to send tapes to the States and stuff like that. And I think you were working with Mr. Ross as well. But was there, at what point did you kind of think, oh shit, man, I'm getting like, there might be something in this for me? When was that?
Honestly, so I remember in maybe 7th or 8th grade, actually, once I started playing in like 6th grade. That's when I first went out. In 7th or 8th grade, I started hearing about, because like I said, I'd only been in the country a few years, right? So I didn't really know about the scholarships and that. And so I actually started finding out about that. It's like, oh, well, I can get my education paid for. And so I remember I telling my mom, I was like, oh, did you know I can get a scholarship? She's like, well, to do what? And I was like, well, I don't know. What? I can play something, right? Play one of these sports. It doesn't matter, but I know I can get a free education. And as I started to get into high school and started playing, mind you, that the North York Bandits team that I played on, there were guys on there that I thought were way better than I was, right? So I never felt like I was, a star or even close to it, because these are the guys that played since they were, 5 or 6. And so I looked up to these guys, and, guys like that. I mean, Michael Power had Godfrey Lewis, and, there's, St. Mike's had Mike Labinjo. Like there's these guys that I just saw and knew, and they've been playing for so long. So as I started playing a little bit more and getting into some of these summer leagues and stuff, that's really where I think the confidence started coming. Like seeing, I was one of the youngest players in this Mississauga summer league. And I remember our last game of the season, we played against Jesse Palmer's team at the time. Jesse was like #1 player in Canada, went to Florida, and they beat us like 63-7, something crazy like that. But I scored my first touchdown in that game, and I hadn't scored all season. Mind you, I was 12 or 13 years old at the time. And so that next year, I started to work with a trainer. And the trainer was actually my little brother's coach. So he was coaching him, and I told him, I was like, oh, I want to try to get a little bit better. He's like, all right, so just come work with me in the off season. And so I would what I started to do, we got a babysitter for my youngest brother. And after I finished practice, I would take the bus to Gold's Gym. And so I would, every day, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd do what I had to do, come to school, go to practice. And like 5 days a week, I would be at Gold's Gym with him, learning how to work out. Like I didn't even know how to pick up a bar or do any of that stuff. And I did that for pretty much like my high school career. Like it was school, whatever sport. I tried to play every sport because I just enjoyed it. And then just getting in there and training. And the training piece, I think, gave me a different mindset of, yeah, guys might be more talented. They might have played for a longer time, but they're not going to outwork me. Right. And that was the mentality that I took at the time. And I started seeing some success with that. And, but I just tried to work on my craft, and I tried to like learn from other guys. There's things I took from, Godfrey Lewis in his game, the way he attacked the goal line and like his leverage and pad leverage. And I watched away, even other positions. I just watched what people did, and I tried to mimic that and learn. And then, it just kind of naturally came. So it was a process, man. I don't think there was like one point. I just knew I wanted to get somewhere, and in order to do that, I had to
put in the
work, right? I had to put in the work. That's the only way I knew that I could try to guarantee some level of success.
Wow. So end of OAC, you're sending tape, and you get accepted to Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
And that Stanford scholarship, if I'm not mistaken, I know the rumor was it was not an academic. It wasn't a sports scholarship, wasn't it? It was.
Well, so
wasn't it?
The thing with Stanford is that it was an academic scholarship, but with Stanford, you have to be accepted in the school academically before they can offer you a scholarship. So, that the standards to get into Stanford are, pretty high. So and especially at that time, they didn't make exceptions, right? It wasn't like, oh, well, he's a good football player, so yeah, we're going to let him in. It's no, you literally have to be accepted first academically before they can even offer you a scholarship. So that was like different from every other school, right? I mean, I went to Ohio State, Michigan State, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Florida State, all these schools that I had, either tripped to or was talking to. I mean, they could offer me early, and it didn't matter. They're like, oh yeah, we'll get you in, we'll figure it out. Yeah. But Stanford's like, no, you have to write this, 10, 12-page essay. You have to send these referrals. You have to do all of that stuff to be accepted before they'd even let me come and take a trip there. Wow. So the standards were just a lot higher. But actually, the funny thing about that is I didn't even know much about Stanford at all. And our guidance counselor at Carr, and I'm blanking on her name right now.
Mr. Mayo?
Yeah. So she was the one that mentioned it. And she's like, hey, there's this school out in California. And she said, I was like, Stanford, like, I thought you were talking about like Stanford, Connecticut, because I didn't know about all the things out there. And I was like, oh, I think she's like, it has this great combination of athletics and academics. And it just so happened that one of my favorite players at the time was John Elway. And I was like, oh, he went to Stanford. And then Ed McCaffrey went to Stanford. And like, I was like, oh, okay, well, I know these guys. And that was the main reason why I took the visit, first of all, because, we grew up watching Big Ten football, right? Like, big backs and, and then you'd watch probably, I think it was ACC at the time with Florida State and those guys. So that's what I watched. I was like, man, I'm going to be a Big Ten back. I'm going to, run behind one of these guys that lines at Ohio State or Wisconsin. And that's where all my trips were, all Big Ten schools. And then Stanford was like my last trip. Wow. So it was just the right things happening at the right time. But even the process to send letters out and all that, I started that after maybe 10th grade. I started putting tape together and I sent it out. There was a guy that played on one of my club league teams named Adriano Belli, and everybody knows Adriano now because he's the kissing bandit in the CFL and all this craziness. But Adriano had gotten a scholarship, I believe it was to Houston, and the team I was playing on, they kept talking about him. And I was like, well, what did he do? I'm like, well, he sent, letter out to 50 schools and, all these things. I was like, well, I'm going to send it out to 100 schools. And that's why I initiated it. I sent out a letter to 100 schools. And then the ones that wrote me back, I sent tape out. So I put together highlight tape after our grade 10 season and sent that out. And then I remember starting getting callbacks and letters back. And my first offer was from North Texas.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, which is, I was so excited to just get like, an offer and talk to the coach. And it was a funny interaction. He's like, well, because at that time, we're not sending this online. This is all VHS tapes. And, he's like, I have a question. Are you, he's like, oh, are you Black? I was like, yeah, I'm from Trinidad. And he's like, oh, you're not. He's like, oh, you're going to get hundreds of offers. You're not going to be able to.
We're not even going to be contention here. So I lost out already.
I was all excited. And he was like, oh, yeah, you're not going to come here. You're okay. So
that made you feel good? Did you kind of shit, man? I'm gonna probably like, some better offers.
If you say so, I was like, but for me, that was my first one. So I mean, that was my goal, right? I was like, get a scholarship, right? Get my education paid for. And I had no idea how I would be received in the U.S. because I didn't go down and do any of the camps down there, anything like that. So I just had to go off of like what I was doing in Canada, and it's just hard to know.
Yeah, it's not. It's a little bit different, right? Like I have some cousins that are in the States that play in the States, and it's like, Friday night high school football was the whole town came out, and the lights are out. It's like, oh my god! I mean, at our high school, we had all the other students watching us, and it was
everybody just standing around. That's and it's funny to see. Even at like our club league games I played with the Mississauga Warriors. We'd have one set of bleachers in there, and that'd be 4 or 5 deep, and then I'd see some of these other guys that I ended up playing with in college, and especially the guys from Texas and Florida and California, like their high school stadiums were. It's like, damn, that's your high school.
That would have been fun.
Yeah.
So you get the acceptance, I guess, from a few schools. Stanford was first on your list at that point, still honestly, not? Or did you look at Stanford and say, shit, that's it, I'm done?
Well, it wasn't until my actual visit, right? So I did a bunch of visits. I think, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Ohio State. And Ohio State was probably my number one at the time. I mean, they were coming. They had one of my favorite players, Eddie George. I kind of, looked at him and I was like, well, he's a tall, big back, I was like, yeah, definitely. So I was a big fan. And, but my last trip was out to Stanford, and my mom actually came with me on a couple of the trips. She came to Wisconsin and maybe Michigan State, and then the Stanford trip, she came out with me because I was a little on the younger side because my birthday was late in the year. So, and I remember going out there, and they pick you up at the airport, they drive you down to 280, this beautiful freeway. You can see the mountains in the background, and then you get onto the campus. They take you down Palm Drive, see the palm trees, this huge church, and it's this beautiful campus. And this is December, right? So I'm leaving Toronto in December, going out there, and the sun is shining, and it's like, this is not bad. This is not bad. But the trip itself went great. Like I think the biggest difference for me was, as I went to each school, I would talk to each of the players, and I'd talk to guys and be like, man, what, not just what you experienced, but like, what do you want to do coming out of this thing? Right. Like, college is a stepping stone, and, I always viewed it as that. So I always ask the guys, what do you want to do? And I think most other schools that I went to, they would tell me, gosh, I want to get to the league. I want, all these things. When I went to Stanford, when I would ask that, it would, I remember asking, I remember this specifically, there was a couple guys, but a guy by the name of Eric Heitman ended up being a first round pick of the 49ers lineman. And I asked him, I was like, well, what do you want to do? And he's like, oh man, I love music. I compose music, but I'm also, studying engineering. And I just asked guy after guy, and they talked about what they actually wanted to do. And yes, football was a part of it, but football wasn't like the be all end all for a lot of those guys. And I think that connection for me was like, I would love to be able to do that. But to me, just getting to college, getting a college education, and the ability to pursue a career afterwards. And I wanted to be a doctor. That was always, and from a young age, that was always my thing. So, I think
you had the insight back then to even realize that this is just a vehicle to get me to the next step. This is not the end result. Football wasn't the end result for you.
Yeah.
Even at that age, you realize it was just a vehicle for me to progress into where I want to go, kind of, right?
Yeah. Well, I think my goal of like being a doctor was more so a focus than like football, right? Like, yes, football's a way for me to get there. Once I found out about a scholarship, I was like, well, I can get one of these things. Football's a way, I'll do that.
That's amazing. That's really amazing.
And that's all my mom, man. She did a great job, I think, of just instilling those values in us in terms of like what's the bigger picture, what do you want to do with your life, and what type of impact do you want to have. Single mom, 3 boys on her own in a new country, like that to me was, I think you appreciate it more, and even more when you have kids. The sacrifices that she made. But I'll tell you a funny story about so that visit to Stanford. My mom came with me, and this whole weekend we're going around, and they have people that host you and stuff. And so this I have a host with me, and I actually have someone with her as well. That's this great lady, and at the time I believe she was vice provost at Stanford, and my mom really hit it off with her. And so by the end of it, they're like laughing it up, and my mom's like, "Oh, I love her. If this is representation of the school. This is definitely somewhere you should be." And it turns out her name is Condoleezza Rice. And so my mom was like hanging with Condi all weekend. They became best buds, and so because of that, my mom was like, "Oh, you have to come here." Yeah. I'm like, "Oh yeah, of course." And so to this day, every time I see Condi, I tell her a reminder of that story and tell her my mom's a Thai. So she had a big part in bringing me out to the West Coast.
I just want to touch back because the beginning of your story, like you said, you couldn't, not that you couldn't be a kid, but you had responsibilities as a young kid as well, right? And I think that probably shaped you into responsibilities of taking care of your siblings, and the responsibilities of, okay, now I got to take care of what I need to do, and responsibilities of working out and doing all these other stuff. Because you could have gone to your head and say, I'm a rock star and I don't need to do anything, and I'll just coattail in and that's it. But you put in the work throughout that whole, and that's just, I think, your motto in your head. You were always a hardworking guy, and which is amazing. So get to Stanford. First time on the field was overwhelming. Like that must have been total sensory overload.
So our first game, man, was at Texas, the University of Texas. It was the last week of August. It's 100 and something degrees, and Texas Stadium fits like 80,000 people. So that's my first foray on the field. I was a true freshman. I didn't start that game, but I ended up finishing the game. Had a decent showing. Ended up, I think, 50 or so yards on like 5 or 6 carries and a touchdown, but we lost the game like 69-17, something ridiculous. But because of the performance and how things went, I actually ended up starting the next week.
Oh wow!
And for the next like 3 or 4 games, like our team just went on a tear, and so we went from 69-17. Then we scored like over 50 points the next 3 games. We beat some really good teams. And mind you, we had some really talented players on that team. Troy Walters was the Biletnikoff winner, best receiver in the country. Willie Howard was one of the top defensive linemen. We had a lot of guys who I was just a piece of it. But we ended up having a lot of success that year and going to the Rose Bowl. Right. So my freshman year, coming in, being able to start on this team, and going to a Rose Bowl, kind of, it's all of it's overwhelming. I can't say after that 69-17 loss, I started looking at the scoreboard of other teams. I was like, oh, Michigan won, Ohio State won. Like, dang, hope this is the right pick here, But the next few weeks
sucked me into this.
Yeah. I was like, there's a lot of high achievers, and education and academics are important, but it surprised me how kind of loose they were in terms of like people had a good time, they had fun, they partied, I wasn't like a big drinker or anything back then, so that wasn't my focus. But like these folks would party out to all hours of the night and then wake up early, study, go and get straight A. Like it was crazy to watch. But the on-field experience was, it was a special thing. We ended up playing against Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl against Ron Dane, who was a Heisman winner that year. Probably the other reason why I didn't go to Wisconsin. I was like, yeah, I can't. I mean, this dude's too good. He's killing it. It'd be nice to be behind them, but yeah, it was a good time.
Beautiful. So yeah, you had your college career, and then coming up to draft season, right?
Yeah. I think it wasn't a real, like, it was always like in the back of my mind, but it didn't really become real to me until maybe 01, when the guys that I played with started, like, that I was really good friends with, a guy by the name of Coy Wire, Tank Williams. Coy Wire was drafted by the Bills, Tank Williams drafted by Tennessee. These guys started making it to the NFL and then coming back, and they're like, oh yeah, I mean, you guys have the talent to be there and to play there, and that's honestly when it started becoming real to me. Is like seeing these guys come back and really give me that confidence to be able to pursue it at that next level. And we had great 3 years. Unfortunately, my last year, Coach Willingham, who's our coach there, got the job at Notre Dame, which first black head coach at Notre Dame was a big deal. But our next year, I mean, we suffered. Like, I think we ended up winning like 2 or 3 games my senior year. There was just a lot of turmoil in and around the team, and just not a great performance. So I think actually after my junior year, a lot of people were asking me if I was going to leave early and come out. I was like, leave Stanford early? I'm like, no, I will get my degree and then I'll figure it out. Like, like I said, it wasn't my main concern, but it did. I think my draft stock and everything, my senior year definitely went down with how poorly the team performed, but ended up finding a really good home with the Seahawks. I had a few options when it came to free agency. Didn't get drafted. It's never a great feeling when you have those high expectations and you don't accomplish them. But I think in the end, having the option on where to go, and I kind of chose Seattle because I had at the combine, we had a great conversation with them, with a few of the guys, their GM at the time, Ted Thompson, like just really hit it off with them. And they told me, like, hey, if you're around, we'd love to come get you. And I knew that they ran a similar offense to what we did at Stanford, same terminology, all that stuff. So I was like, man, if I'm going to go somewhere, I want every advantage that I can have. And I didn't have to learn new terminology. And for a running back going to the NFL, the biggest thing is like, people know you can run and catch the ball, but can you block? And can you, read the defense and things like that? So I think that's really what helped me early on as I went through the process, as I came into Seattle as a rookie, undrafted, free agent. And they always kept, two fullbacks, 2 tailbacks, but they found a way to keep me on the roster and end up playing special teams for the next couple of years. But that was a life-changing experience. Obviously, being able to make it to that level.
Well, you're on the big stage now, so that must have been okay. Wow, this is now really taking me, because again, this is not the dominant thing. It's more for you're trying to go to education, be a doctor, but this is now taking me on this journey. And you're not so bad at this thing to make it.
It felt right. It felt like a good thing, right thing. And I just tried to take it all in, man, appreciate it for what it was, and then just work my butt off to try to stay around there as long as I can. The game is tough though, right? I always say it's a great job to have. It's a hard job to keep, right? Because there's always somebody younger, faster, strong,
faster, hungrier. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
right behind you. And then there's injuries, right? So, I unfortunately, spent a couple years in Seattle. I was injured my third year in the preseason. So I think I only played in one preseason game, got released, then I got picked up by the Redskins. And,
That's an interesting story for picking up from the Redskins. So yeah, what
yeah,
happened in that backfield? Because that was probably life-changing for you at that point, wasn't it?
yeah. Well, no, actually, so that was before.
Oh, that was
Yeah.
before. Okay.
Yeah. So it was, so yeah, if we go back to college, right? So, and I believe this was I want to say my sophomore year. Hold on, let me think about it. Yeah, it was '01. Um, so, and yeah, I got there in '99. We played in the Rose Bowl in 2000, sophomore year. Yeah, it was sophomore year. So playing against University of Washington. So it was the university up
Oh,
here.
sorry. It's right. It was University of
Yeah,
Washington.
University of Washington. And yeah, so it's funny. You talked about my brother earlier. Like he was, it's not something I talk about a lot, but it's something that's obviously weighed on my mind. And I did a piece for his platform, Love and Literature, and I wrote this kind of 4-part essay about my experience, this kind of life-changing experience in college. Running the ball in that game, we had just, won the championship the year before. We're coming back, we're trying to defend it. And, it's been a tough season for us. Going into this game, it was kind of a pivotal one, great team, Washington coming in. And, so we're battling, going into it first quarter, second quarter, come out in the second half. And we're just, I'm just trying to play the game, get the ball, running through the hole, put my shoulder down, break a tackle, a little upset at myself because I didn't get more with it. And then I got up and I looked back and I saw that the safety who had hit me hadn't gotten up, and then I kind of noticed the panic around people's faces as they started running onto the field with the trainers and whatnot. And, turns out his name's Curtis Williams. So Curtis, didn't get up from there. They had to escort him off on a stretcher, take him to the hospital, and found out after the game, or actually after the game a little later, that, it was a neck issue and he ended up being paralyzed, like from the neck down. Right. And that's, it's, you try not to put that weight on yourself because it I always say I didn't do anything different on that play that I would have done. I mean, I had the
Nothing
ball.
malicious, nothing.
Yeah, nothing, but it's still hard because you're involved in it, right? And you're for me, I felt, a level of responsibility because, I was involved in that play, in that collision, and that changed, obviously it drastically changed Curtis's life and his, the friends and family around him. And then it drastically changed my life as well in terms of how something like that affects you in the long run. So, unfortunately as well, Curtis, was around for another year and a half or so, but passed away from some complications unrelated necessarily to that. But it was, that was even tougher to hear too, coming out of, I think going through that process and I was starting to come to terms with, okay, well, maybe, I'm an eternal optimist, man. So I always look for I'm like, okay, well, what good can come of this? And I was like, man, I hope that, there's something that he can do to use this to, enrich the lives of others and find a way to use this as motivation. But I think his passing kind of took all that away, right? Like him passing away, and now I knew that, man.
Yeah.
He's never going to get that chance, right? He's never going to get to use this for something positive. And so that kind of became my mission in a way. Is this game that we love is never, it's not forever, and there's no guarantees in it, but it can be a great platform, if you use it correctly. And I think that's what I try to do, moving forward was just use the platform of football for something positive and find a way to uh, represent, him in a way. And it took me a while to get there. There's things I did on a personal level in terms of, and once I got to the NFL, I started a foundation, the Think Big Foundation, and we did programs in arts, academics, and athletics. And I try to impart wisdom on that next generation and youth, and show them that just like when I went to Stanford, it wasn't just because of one thing. It's like I wanted to pursue my passion, but I had a purpose in terms of what I wanted to do with my life, and I saw what all the other guys had varied interests, and so I tried to create something that was like that in a sense. You can it doesn't matter if you go athletic route, arts, academics, like there's a place for you. And so that, I think that experience and that tragedy definitely shaped my thinking and my approach to things. And so, I went from, all the stuff off the field, with my foundation. And then later on, once I left the game and I started doing kind of events and experiences and stuff, everything that I did had a, for-profit and a nonprofit aspect. So every event that we did, we found local nonprofits to benefit from it. Did a ton of like clinics and camps and things like that, but also did like these large-scale events for other players where they were launching their foundations or they're finding good ways to give back. So I just felt like, man, I've been given this platform. I better make good use of it. While I have the opportunity to.
It's a mature ideology to have, especially at that age, because especially during high school and college ball, you're still green to a certain degree. You're still, and I think again, I'm going to come back to the responsibilities you had as a kid. I think your mind was in a different place from how you were raised, because that whole experience could have totally changed a different trajectory. You could have totally gone down this downward spiral of, like even like how long before you were able to want to carry the ball again and go down that hole again. Like that must have been quite traumatic for you. Like, I don't know if I want to.
Yeah. No, I think it did have, that negative effect, right? Because I think, that was, like I said, my sophomore year. So going into my junior year, it took a lot to kind of get back to that, right? It was a confidence thing, but it also made me doubt, like, well, is this the right path, right? Like, okay, yeah, this sport is giving me this platform, but man, at what cost, right? Like, at what cost? And then you start thinking about the risks, and but it's hard. You can't play the game that way. You can't play the game fearful. You can't play the game scared. You can't play it timidly, like, because that's even more dangerous than playing at full speed, right? And that's when people do tend to have incidents or get hurt. It's when you're not really playing at your full potential or playing at 100% or full speed. So yeah, it took me a while, and honestly, I think that next year, especially that off season, was a tough one because for all those reasons, right? I think I had a great support system, both like with my family and then the coaches and players. But I had to get to a place where I felt comfortable and confident, doing those things again as well, because that does stick with you in the back of your mind. But in the end, I think, as much as football, I think football was the thing that brought me back, right? I just started to think about, well, I committed to using this platform. This is what brought me here. This is part of the journey. I prayed about it. I meditated on it, and I'm like, well, I'm still here, and I still have this opportunity. And I think football gives me the best chance to amplify whatever message I get to at some point in time. I didn't have a blueprint for it at that time. I just knew that, if I can, one thing that it's always helped me do, kind of like what I did in high school, right? With the training, when you're in that kind of singularly focused mode, you tend to block out everything else, right? And that becomes your focus. And so that work became kind of that mantra. And it's like a daily way to practice, focus, meditation, and it blocks out all the other noise. So that's what I did. I just focused on, okay, well, how can let me go back to my craft? Let me go back. How do I get better at this? And, training, and not just physical training, but mental training and meditation and, yoga, all these things to help, just put me on a different path and train my mind to focus on the task at hand. And I think that's where I learned, to some degree, compartmentalization. Right, like that
I
was
think you had to, especially after that experience, you had to compartmentalize it, right? Or else you'd be able to move on from it, right?
Yeah. So it's this idea of like you walk into the locker room and you put everything else aside, and work doesn't matter, school doesn't matter, all that. What matters is, okay, your commitment to what you're going to do with this group to help us achieve our goal. And that was kind of fostered for me in college with Coach Willingham, and even more so when I got to the Alouettes with Coach Mark Trestman.
Yes, I wanted to get into that. So so you transitioned from the NFL, Seattle, then I think year for the Redskins, and then the following year. How does that transition happen? Because I know I'm so as a young kid, my father's always watched CFL. I've watched CFL from I was 3 years old, and I still watch it today. I bring my dad to the Grey Cup. How does that transition happen? Because there's a lot of NFLers coming over to CFL playing ball. What was that like? How did that happen?
Yeah. So the Alouettes had drafted me when I came out of college. And so they essentially own your rights, right? So after my eligibilities expired in the U.S. college, if they decide to draft you, that just means they own your rights if you do decide to come. And so when I got to the Redskins, I was having a great preseason, was really looking forward to that season. So I, just thought the energy and everything was good with that team. And then in our first preseason game, so Clinton Portis was a starting running back. Clinton got hurt. Our backup running back, Liddell Betts, got hurt. And so it's the first quarter, and I'm in the game, but I'm also playing all the special teams. But you do whatever you can. I mean, you're coming in as a free agent. But then I think it was second quarter, so I ended up tearing my ACL, like non-contact, crazy thing. And so I, had surgery, missed that year. And then going into the next year, I wasn't ready yet. I think it was around the time of the draft or whatnot. I came back to Washington. But I knew that I didn't think I would be ready for the start of training camp. And so they released me. But I didn't want to sit and wait for another year to go by in the NFL. And so I asked my agent to reach out to the Alouettes and see what the situation was there. And they, welcomed me with open arms, kind of gave me the chance to transition into a role there with the team. And so that year, I believe it was 2007, ended up joining the team it was like September. I think I ended up joining the team. And just kind of working my way in. And it was a transition year for them too, because they had just lost their head coach. He stepped away, I think, for health reasons. And the GM, Jim Pop, at the time became the head coach. But I knew that they were going to bring someone else on. So I, jumped in there. And honestly, the goal was like go up there, play 1 or 2 years, and then head back to the NFL. Right? That's most people's plan. But honestly, when I came up there, I really enjoyed the experience. Like I enjoyed the city of Montreal. I'd never been there. Got to practice my French. But so I got to be there and be around that environment. And I think even then I was thinking about, okay, well, just get back to the NFL. And then Coach Trestman came on board. I remember us meeting up down we actually met up in Utah. He brought a bunch of us out there to meet the new coach, and in my mind, like we hit it off right away. I saw kind of his vision for what he wanted to do with the team, and that gave me like more confidence. And plus, I needed, like in my mind, I needed to have great film. Anyways, I needed better film. I needed to have a season where I was completely recovered and healthy. I played with a brace that 2007 seasons. I was like, no, I need to not have a brace on. I need, all those things. But the thing that I didn't anticipate was like the run that we would go on as an organization from that point, right? And so, the team was doing well. The year before that had some struggles, but then, those next 4 years, man, we went on run, right? It went to
Two
three
great cups, if
straight
I'm not
great. Yeah,
mistaken.
we went to three Grey Cups in a row, 1-2 back to back. Just had a lot of success as a team, and there's just the guys on that team, right? Like you have a lifetime bond with these guys that you set out on this journey with, and helps you achieve it. But I think it was just a great combination. The timing was right. The coaching staff, I got to play with one of the all-time greats in Anthony Calvillo, Ben Cahoon, my guy, Jamel Richardson, Kerry Carter, like all these guys that were stars in this league for years. And just to be a part of that and see the success, and the city embraced us. And so it just made football fun, right? Like it made it fun again in my mind. And one of the great things about the CFL at that time, you would be there for the season, and the off season you were kind of on your own, right? For me, that was perfect because I had these other interests, right? I had interests outside off the field, so I got to, do a little bit of everything in the off season, from financial services, insurance, and actually that's when I got into tech and mobile and things like that. And so that's what actually started my like kind of off field journey, is just getting those off seasons to jump into some other projects and learn about different things, try out things to see what I would like, what I would be good at, and so yeah, that journey itself was crazy, but there was nothing like that time in Montreal. I think success adds to it. It makes it a lot
Definitely makes it a lot sweeter, man. Definitely winning a couple of those great cups is pretty awesome. So 2011, after that, that's where, I guess your trajectory starts to change a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah. I actually had a year left on my contract there with the Alouettes. But I was doing some things here in Seattle, and I, partnered with another former player that I played with the Seahawks, and I spent the last off season back in Seattle as well. Just, he was running this mobile company, and I just wanted to learn it. He just let me sit in on meetings, and I learned the business just through osmosis, really sitting in, asking questions. Like I literally sat on their conference call for like 2 months without saying a word, just listening, because I had to understand the language, and and then once they started to kind of branch off on their own, they're like, well, yeah, you went to Stanford, you should know some of this stuff. I was like, I went to Stanford for medicine, like not technology. They're like, well, how long is it going to take you? So I just jumped into it, and I was like jumped into the mobile world and tech and learned all about it. And so I helped put together a plan so we can go acquire this company, and then help run it. And that's what kind of started my journey outside of there. And then I think at that time, as I was thinking about, well, do I go back? And I always wanted to make it to 10 years. That was my goal, and that was after year 9. So I was like, just one more year. But at the time, man, it just became like, I was like, well, if I go back, we lose all the momentum that we have here, and I really want to build something outside of football. And so, the Alouettes ended up releasing me like right before the season. And I got calls from other teams, and I was like, I don't know, it was a tough decision. But literally, I tell you, it's a decision that also changed my life. I'm this was like you said, like 2011. I got married a few years earlier, about three years earlier, but my wife and I were going through a divorce at the time. And so a good friend of mine like subleased her place to me in Seattle. I was staying there like as in the off season, going into the summer. So, divorced, trying to figure out what's next with my career. And my friend who subleased me the place, it's in Seattle, we have a Seafair out here. It's a big, summer festival on the water. And so I literally decided, okay, I'm not going to go back to football. I'm going to stay here. Subleased her place, and then Seafair weekend comes, and she's like, man, you should, come join us on this boat. We got somebody for you to meet. And, walked onto this boat and met my now wife. And mother of my two children. So it's just interesting how like those decisions, right? Like literally, it's a week after I decided, okay, I'm not going to go. I'm going to stay. If I made that decision, I'd be gone, right? I'd be back in one of these cities and all that. So yeah, that trend it helped me kind of make the transition because I felt like you get little things that confirm it for you pretty quickly. And obviously, I didn't know she would be my wife at that point, but it was a pretty good indication that like okay, you got a good thing going, you got business going, you met this wonderful woman. Yeah, this is the right path and the right decision for you. So it helped for sure.
And they're beautiful children. So like, congrats on that, man. I see they're just on Facebook and stuff. So.
Oh yeah, they're all over Facebook and
Instagram. So I want to get to another question, but before I get to that, so as of now, you are the CEO of Atavus, which is, I was researching it. It's quite amazing on what they actually do. Starting off in rugby to now, like head placement and spine alignment and stuff like that. Tell us a little bit about that and how you actually got into that.
Yeah. So, once I finished playing, I've always been an entrepreneur and I wanted to do things, on my own. And so I, started a company with my old partner. It's called Jump It Media. And we did, things in tech and sports. But we really found our footing in like this kind of large scale event space. So, we created these events for other athletes, like I mentioned, to launch their nonprofits or to find ways to give back in the community. And had a lot of really good success with it. But, just it got to a point where it was a little bit overwhelming in terms of the commitment, right? Like, at the time I was, kind of newly married. We have a little one. And I was spending, I'd be in the office for the week. And then on the weekends, we'd be doing games. So we'd either be at the stadium for the games or we'd host a Thursday night game or a Monday night game at a casino. So I was like, out all the time.
And yeah, like, the newborn and your wife, like, I didn't sign up for me to be doing this. Where the hell you get back over here? I need a break.
Yeah. So I think just going through that process itself just like gave me like I got to the point where I was like, okay, I feel like I need to find a little bit different path and slow things down. And it just so happened one of my friends was doing PR for this company and he'd been telling me about it for like a year. It's like, oh, it's this rugby company and here's what they're doing. But I wasn't really a rugby fan. So I didn't know too much about it. But as we kept talking, he's like, well, actually, they started a football division because of their connection with the Seahawks. The Seahawks had started studying rugby tackling because of this organization. It's called, at the time, it was called Serevi Rugby. And Waiseli Serevi is this world famous Fijian rugby player. And he had come to the U.S. with the owners of this company, and they were trying to bring the game of rugby to the U.S. and doing youth camps and clinics all over the country. They partnered with USA Rugby, and so the connection with the Seahawks, they're a guy by the name of Rocky Seto, who's Pete Carroll's kind of tackling guy, and Waiseli went to the same church, and they started talking about football and. Well, hey, how come in rugby, you guys are talking about no helmets and the injury incidents are lower? So they started getting together and they did some consulting and the Seahawks put out this hawk tackling video that went viral, right? And it just so happened, obviously, at the time, the Seahawks were one of the best defenses in the league and they tackled great and all this stuff. So as they did that, people started asking about it and Seahawks started pointing people to Serevi and they're like, well, we're a rugby company and, but we can do this football thing. So they started a football division, brought on a couple people, and the timing was just right. Like there wasn't really a role there, but because my friend was doing PR and they were about to launch their first online product, which is a suite of, tackling videos, training videos to teach you how to teach this rugby style tackling, right? So it's head out, same foot, same shoulder. So it's teaching how to be more powerful, perform at a higher level, but be safer at the same time. And that for me was like, I never even thought about that. Right? You think about football and you hear all these things about concussions. Well, you think, well, all right, like helmet technology, what can we do there? And wearables and rules. It never even occurred to me to like, well, why don't we change how we tackle? Right? It wasn't even a thought. So when I found out about what they were doing and the fact that they were about to launch an online product, I was like, well, I have a you know, obviously sports background, been in tech, you know, and I know kind of the digital space because with our previous company, we didn't just do events, we did software development. So we would design websites, we'd run social media, you know, on top of producing these events. So I felt like I had a really good well-rounded skill set. And so that actually brought me on at the time in a business development role to kind of just figure things out. But I treat everything like it's my own business. And so that's the approach I took. I was like, well, if this was my company, here's the things I would do. And I just did everything. I didn't like sit and say, oh, well, I can only do this in this role. I was like, well, where do we need help? Right. And so I just jumped into as many things as possible within that company. We had a change in leadership at that time, brought on a lady by the name of Karen Bryant, who was the GM of the Seattle Storm, which is a WNBA team. She worked a long time with the Seattle Sonics when they were here, started the Storm. She came over and her and I just really hit it off. And, you know, I think, you know, I kind of became her football guy in there. And so she gave me a lot of leeway to kind of do the things I wanted to do and pushed me up. And so I went from just doing, you know, business development to becoming the VP of operations. And so now I just, you know, I resided over all of our analyst group and then our coaches and developing programming, you know, launching our products online, to, you know, even helping us go out and raise money. And all that, you know, was in this idea of what kind of effect can we have on the game of football from a performance and most notably a safety perspective. And obviously it all comes full circle, right? With everything that happened with Curtis. I believe in those signs and fates and that. And so that direction was like clear to me. So it made it really easy to wake up every day and go in and do what I did because it was easy to make that connection to.
That's giving me goosebumps because it really just came full circle.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Man. Yeah. Ooh, and I couldn't have planned it like that. I didn't think of this idea, but I knew when I saw it, I was like, okay, God, I hear you. You know, if this is the direction you want me to go, I'm going to do that. And I've been there for the last 6 years. The company was acquired in 2019, and then they you know raised me up to the C-suite level, and so I've been running that now for the last few years. And it's something I'm hugely proud of, right? Because we've had this effect on coaches. And I think about, can we affect like one player? And like if we can prevent what happened, you know, with Curtis, which is one other player, I consider it a success. And I'd say that because we've worked with now, you know, well over 40,000 coaches. And you think about 40,000 coaches, they're responsible for 50 to 100 athletes. So now I feel like, okay, that's the multiplier effect of what I'm able to do with what we're doing as a business. So this is another one I've been kind of thinking about. How do you encapsulate like a lot of things into one thing? Like, and I always admire people that can take complicated things and make them really simple. That's like one of the things that, like, when I meet people like that, I'm drawn to them. I just want to ask them a whole bunch of questions. But the idea of chase what inspires you, man. Like just so the concept is really, I call it like chasing lightning, right? And you think of lightning, it's like this big thing, it's this big event. But really lightning to me is like it's inspiration, right? Like chase what inspires you, chase what you're passionate about, chase what brings you purpose, chase what brings you peace. If you focus on those things, and I mean it from, and I can use myself as an example. Obviously, football was a big thing for me, but I love all sports, right? I love being active, right? And I love competing. So that's what really drove that. I chased that feeling. You know, nowadays it's, you know, finding things that you're passionate about on a daily basis. So yes, football is one of them, but fatherhood, you know, I want to be the best father I can be. So I'm looking for ways to connect with my kids to make sure that they're getting the best out of life. You know, food, I love cooking. It's a newfound love. But it's something that I know when I'm doing it, like I lose. I always say, like, if you're losing time doing it, like you don't even realize, oh shoot, like an hour has gone by, right? Like chase that, right? That's because that's something that you enjoy. Whether you don't have to be a pro at something, you just have to enjoy it and lose yourself in it. And be able to I would say withstand the pain, right? Like if you love something, you can withstand the monotony of the commitment to it. That was with football. I loved practice with all the training, like all those things. I loved the grind, and I can withstand it because I knew like bigger picture what I was working towards. And I think for anyone out there that's pursuing anything, whether it's athletics or academics or career, find the thing that you can be really passionate about. Find the thing where the pain, you can withstand the pain and you actually enjoy the grind, right? Like you, I think I'm sure with what you do, on a daily basis, there's aspects of that other people would hate. And you're like, oh man, I don't like talking to people. I don't like doing contracts. I don't like this or that, whatever that is. But you found it, and you found a way to like, no, you can deal with that because you're passionate about it, and you find whatever it is in there that motivates you. It's like seeing the joy on someone's face when they buy their first home, when they get those keys, like seeing the kids run around, like whatever that is for you, you found it, and you're just continuing to feed that passion and purpose. So that's what I'd say, man. For anyone out there, chase lightning, man. Passion.
I love that. Chase lightning. Yeah, you're right. You have to fall in love with the process, right? And as shitty, as hard as that process is, and it'll be difficult sometimes, but if you can fall in love with the process, the end result is so magical. And that's, I think that encapsulates kind of what you fell in love with the process, and no matter where it was, whether it was on the field, in the office, or with the family, you love the process. So that's amazing.
Absolutely, man.
Awesome, brother. Well, I think that's it. I just want to say thank you so much. I just want to say, whether on or off the record, man, you were an inspiration back then. You were inspiration. I'm glad I know we weren't the best of friends, but I'm glad to have known you as a friend in high school. And I looked up to you in the sense of your success and what you've done with it and all that stuff. So I brag about you all the time when I'm on that field. You guys know Kerry Carter.
I appreciate it, man.
CFL, I'm like, oh my God, he's on the Alouettes. And so it's been an honor to know you, man. I just want to know how special that was.
Appreciate that, man. And yeah, those times in life are what shapes you, right? And it's the things that you hold on to. I think I remember more things on the field and with the players and with teammates than any other time in my life. Like those are the things and the moments you remember the most. So, I appreciate that. And definitely, as we go into this next year and things start opening up and travel and all that, I'd love to come up and check out the guys and check out the team. I haven't been back there in a while. So
man. Yeah, we're doing spring ball. So actually Coach Bell was supposed to come in today at 2:00, but we're doing it next Tuesday. Really great Coach Luke. I think he played university ball or something. Amazing guy. He runs the team basically with Bell. So yeah, we're planning to do spring ball and get them in the gym now. So yeah, I'm totally committed to it. It's a fun process. It's fun seeing them, and it's hard to believe that we were once there in that same.
I know, yeah, crazy. That's crazy.
I never saw grade 12s cry. Big boys crying that their season was over, and it's like, oh my God! And I'm like. And I remember giving a speech telling guys, like, yes, the season's over, but don't forget what you learned on the field, what we taught you here, because you're going to use that in life. Everything that you worked, how you worked on the field, the practice, the dedication is replicatable in anything else you want to pursue in life. So just remember that. You've learned a really great aspect on this field that you can now use, and don't forget that. So
that's huge, man. It's huge. Yeah, keep pushing that message. It's funny. It'll come back and it'll click at some point. Some of them will get it now, but some of them it'll just be at different points in their life where they'll be like, "Oh, this is what he meant." Or I see it now, right? I find that.
Awesome. Thanks again, brother. I appreciate it, man.
My pleasure, man. You take care. We'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Talk to you, Kerry.
So tell the camera. Conclusion. How was that on an emotional level for you because of the actual history that you have with this individual?
That was amazing. Like Kerry was such a great guy. He was and he was one of those guys that, again, I want to reiterate that he was not only a jock, he was not only a field, he was a smart boy. Like he wanted to be a doctor. That says a lot. And you can see it. And I mentioned it. I mentioned it on the interview. I mentioned it to a lot of people. You can tell when somebody's how they hold themselves. And Kerry was one of those individuals. And again, it's just fortunate just to share the field with them, to share that moment, those moments with him, and just to see somebody like that on a big stage, and now what he's doing now is amazing. So,
and is this what deep inside is all about?
This is what deep inside is all
You
about.
know deep inside it's killing me.
Cut.
Close your eyes and hope to see, but you might be the death of me, the very last breath of me. Deep inside it's killing me. Close your eyes and hope to see, you might be the death of me.